My brother moved in and became controlling. When I said I wanted to move out, he punched me in the face and I fled the apartment. Blood streamed from my split lip, dripping onto my shirt as I stumbled out of my apartment door. My bare feet slapped against the cold, gritty hallway floor, each step sending a jolt through my body. My phone was clutched in my hand, its screen cracked, the display flickering with jagged lines that made it nearly unusable. It was 3 a.m., and the street outside was dead silent, not a single car or person in sight. I had no jacket, no wallet, nothing but the clothes I was wearing, sweatpants and a thin t-shirt. My head throbbed, a dull ache spreading from where the punch had landed, and my ears rang with a high-pitched whine that wouldn't stop. The taste of copper filled my mouth, thick and metallic, mixing with the spit I kept swallowing. I stood there for a moment, just outside the door, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. I didn't know where to go. My apartment, the place I'd called home, was behind me, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It hadn't for a long time. I took a step toward the stairwell, then another, my legs moving on their own. The concrete steps were freezing, and I gripped the railing to keep from slipping. When I reached the street, the air hit me hard, cutting through my shirt. I looked back at the building, its dark windows staring down like blank eyes. My keys were still inside, on the kitchen counter where I dropped them. I hadn't thought to grab anything else, just the phone, useless as it was now. I started walking, not sure where I was headed, just knowing I couldn't stay there. The sidewalk was rough under my feet, bits of gravel sticking to my soles. My lip kept bleeding, and I wiped it with the back of my hand, smearing red across my knuckles. The night felt endless, like it would swallow me whole if I stopped moving. I kept going, one foot in front of the other, until the apartment building was out of sight. 18 months ago, my brother showed up at my door with a duffel bag and a story about his life falling apart. He was older than me by 3 years, always the one who seemed to have it together growing up. He said his divorce had cleaned him out, his ex got the house, the car, everything. He couldn't afford rent anywhere decent, and he needed a place to crash until he got back on his feet. I had a 1-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The couch wasn't much, but I offered it to him, thinking it would be temporary. A few months, maybe? He moved in the next day, his stuff taking over the living room. At first, it wasn't bad. He cooked sometimes, simple stuff like eggs or pasta, and we'd watch TV together after I got home from work. I thought we were getting along, like brothers should. But then things started to shift. He began rearranging my place without asking. My coffee table got pushed to the corner because he wanted more space to stretch out. He changed the Wi-Fi password, saying mine was too weak. The thermostat was always set to what he liked, even when I was sweating or freezing. He started making comments about my habits, how I left dishes in the sink too long, how I didn't fold my laundry right. It was small stuff, but it added up. I worked long hours at a warehouse, lifting boxes, coming home exhausted, and he'd be there, sprawled on the couch, scrolling his phone. He never offered to chip in for groceries or bills, just said he was waiting for a job to come through. I didn't push it at first. He was family, and I told myself he was going through something. But the months dragged on, and the couch became his permanent spot, his clothes and empty cans piling up around it. My apartment didn't feel like home anymore, it felt like his territory, and I was just allowed to stay there. He never paid for anything. Not a single bill, not even a loaf of bread. I covered the rent, the electricity, the internet, everything. My paycheck was gone by the end of each month, and I started dipping into my savings just to keep up. He always had an excuse: job interviews that didn't pan out, recruiters who ghosted him. But I'd see him with new stuff, a case of beer, a shiny pair of headphones, receipts for online bets on football games. He wasn't broke, not completely, just selective about what he spent money on. I tried bringing it up once, casually, over dinner. I mentioned the electric bill being higher than usual. He shrugged, said he'd get me back when he was working, then turned the TV louder. Another time, I pointed out how much I was spending on groceries for both of us. He got loud, said I was keeping score like some kind of accountant, and stormed out for a few hours. I stopped asking after that. It wasn't worth the argument. He had this way of making me feel small, like I was the one being unreasonable. I started eating cheaper, skipping lunches at work to save money. My fridge was full of his energy drinks and takeout containers, while I was boiling noodles for myself. He didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't care. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that he'd get a job, move out, and things would go back to normal. But he settled in deeper. He changed the locks once, claiming it was for safety, but didn't give me a new key for a week. My own apartment, and I had to knock to get in. I started staying out longer, picking up extra shifts just to avoid him. But every time I came home, there he was, in control of my space, my life shrinking to fit around his presence. My brother started deciding who could come to the apartment. He never said it outright, but he made it clear through his actions. My girlfriend used to visit a couple of times a week. She'd bring over snacks, and we'd watch movies or just talk. But he'd sit there, not on the couch but in my armchair, staring at her. He'd make comments about her clothes, her job, how she parked her car too close to the curb. Nothing big, just enough to make her tense. She started coming over less, saying she felt watched. One night she left early after he kept interrupting us, asking her why she didn't smile more. She texted me later, saying she couldn't handle it anymore. I begged her to keep coming, said I'd talk to him, but I never did. I was too tired, too afraid of his reaction. Soon, she stopped visiting altogether. My friends got the same treatment. If they dropped by, he'd hover, ask them what they were doing there, like he was the one paying rent. Most of them drifted away, not wanting the hassle. I couldn't blame them. I felt alone, trapped in my own place. Then he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I came home from work one day and found my gaming console gone. It was an old system, nothing fancy, but I'd saved up for it years ago. It was my way to unwind. He said he sold it, claimed I was wasting time playing games when I should be focusing on my career. I stood there, staring at the empty spot on my shelf, feeling something break inside me. He didn't even look sorry, just went back to his phone like it was nothing. I started locking my bedroom door at night, not because I thought he'd hurt me, but because I didn't trust him anymore. My apartment wasn't mine, it was his domain, and I was just existing in it. I reached my limit. I couldn't keep living like this, paying for everything, walking on eggshells in my own home. I started looking for a new apartment, somewhere small, somewhere I could afford alone. I didn't want to kick him out. I knew he had nowhere to go, but I needed to get away. I spent weeks checking listings, visiting places after work, keeping it quiet. One evening, I found a studio that fit my budget. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I came home that night, sat on the couch, and told him I was planning to move out. I kept my voice steady, said I'd give him time to figure things out, that I just needed my own space. He was on his phone, scrolling, and at first, he didn't even look up. Then he put the phone down and stared at me. His eyes were hard, like I'd accused him of something. He asked why I wanted to leave, said I was abandoning him after everything he'd been through. I explained again, said it wasn't about him, just about me needing a change. He stood up, pacing the living room, his hands clenched. He asked if someone else was behind it, like I was too weak to make my own decisions. I shook my head, repeated that it was my choice. He stopped pacing and turned to me, his face red. I thought he'd yell, like he always did when things didn't go his way. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing heavy, and I felt the air shift, like something was about to snap. I stayed seated, gripping the edge of the couch, waiting for him to say something, anything. I didn't expect what came next. I didn't expect him to take 2 steps toward me, his fist already moving. I didn't expect the pain that exploded across my face, or the way the room tilted as I tried to stay upright. The punch landed hard, my head snapping back as pain exploded across my cheek and jaw. Blood filled my mouth, warm and thick, spilling over my lip before I could stop it. My vision blurred, the room spinning for a second, but I didn't fall. I sat there, stunned, one hand gripping the couch to keep myself steady. My brother stood over me, his fists still clenched, his chest heaving like he'd just run a mile. He didn't say anything, didn't apologize, just stared down at me with eyes I didn't recognize. I tasted more blood, felt it drip onto my shirt, staining the fabric. My phone was on the coffee table, and I grabbed it without thinking, my fingers shaking as I closed my hand around it. The screen was cracked from when I dropped it earlier that week, but it still lit up. I stood, my legs unsteady, and backed toward the door. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me, just watched as I fumbled for my keys on the counter. My face throbbed, each heartbeat sending a fresh pulse of pain through my skull. I didn't look at him again. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and pulled it shut behind me. The click of the latch felt final, like I was locking away more than just the apartment. My bare feet hit the cold floor, and I moved toward the stairwell, not thinking about where I was going, just knowing I had to leave. The building was silent, the kind of quiet that swallows every sound except your own breathing. I made it to the street, the night air sharp against my skin, and kept walking. Blood dried on my chin, my phone dimming in my hand. I didn't call anyone, didn't stop to check the damage. I just walked, the city blurring around me, until I was far enough away that I couldn't feel him behind me anymore. I ended up at a 24-hour diner a few blocks away, my feet sore and filthy from the pavement. The waitress gave me a long look but didn't ask questions, just handed me a napkin and a glass of water. I sat in a booth, staring at my phone, its cracked screen barely responding. My face hurt, my lips swollen, and my jaw ached every time I moved it. I cleaned the blood off as best I could, the napkin turning red. After an hour, I called a friend from work, someone I hadn't seen much since my brother moved in. He answered groggy, but told me to come over when I explained what happened. His place was small, a cramped basement apartment, but he let me crash on his couch. I didn't sleep, just lay there, replaying the night in my head. The next morning, I went to the police station. My friend came with me, sitting quietly as I filled out a report. The officer took photos of my face, asked questions, and said they'd follow up. I didn't expect much, but I needed it on record. Then I went to my landlord. He was an older guy, usually gruff, but his face softened when he saw me. I told him everything, my brother, the punch, how I couldn't go back. He said I was still responsible for the lease but promised to help however he could. When I returned to the apartment with a police escort later that day, my brother was still there. He didn't look at me, just sat on the couch like nothing had happened. I started the eviction process that week, filing papers through a legal aid office. My brother didn't leave quietly. Before he finally moved out, he trashed the place, smashed my laptop, ripped my couch cushions, left cigarette burns on the carpet. The apartment was a wreck, and he was gone by the time I got the eviction notice approved. I stood in the doorway, looking at the mess, feeling like I'd lost more than just my stuff.